A reading from the book of John, chapter 13, verses 1 through 17, and 31b through 35. Now before the festival of the Passover, Jesus knew that his hour had come to depart from this world and go to the Father. Having loved his own who were in the world, he loved them to the end. The devil had already put it into the heart of Judas, son of Simon Iscariot, to betray him. And during supper, Jesus, knowing that the Father had given all things into his hands, and that he had come from God and was going to God, got up from the table, took off his outer robe, and tied a towel around himself. Then he poured water into a basin and began to wash the disciples' feet, and to wipe them with the towel that was tied around him. He came to Simon Peter, who said to him, "Lord, are you going to wash my feet?" Jesus answered, "You do not know now what I am doing, but you later will understand." Peter said to him, "You will never wash my feet." And Jesus answered, "Unless I wash you, you have no share with me." Simon Peter said to him, "Lord, not my feet only, but also my hands and my head." And Jesus said to him, "One who has bathed does not need to wash except for his feet, but is entirely clean, and you are clean, though not all of you." For he knew who was to betray him. For this reason he said, "Not all of you are clean." After he had washed their feet, had put on his robe, and returned to the table, he said to them, "Do you know what I have done for you? You call me teacher and Lord, and you are right, for that is what I am. So if I, your Lord and teacher, have washed your feet, you also ought to wash one another's feet. For I have set you an example, and you should do as I have done to you. Very truly I tell you, servants are not greater than their masters, nor are messengers greater than those who sent them. If you know these things, you are blessed if you do them." When he had gone out, Jesus said, "Now the Son of Man has been glorified, and God has been glorified in him. If God has been glorified in him, God will also glorify him in himself, and will glorify him at once. Little children, I am with you only a little longer. You will look for me, and as I said to the Jews, so now I say to you, where I am going, you cannot come. I gave you a new commandment, that you love one another. Just as I have loved you, you also should love one another. By this, everybody will know that you are my disciples, if you have love for one another." This is the word of the Lord for the people of God. Thanks be to God. For me, one of the most powerful lines in the Bible is this description of Christ's love. Having loved his own who were in the world, he loved them to the end. I think I would be very happy if I could be eulogized in such a way. Christ, knowing the impending betrayal and death, Christ held on to love until the end. In a time of darkness, Christ chose to love and to serve. It's telling that Christ chooses this moment, one of the last with his disciples before his death, before the fracturing of the 12, to model humility and servitude. Christ cleans the feet of the disciples because they have been traveling, and this is what you do when you come to dinner. You have your feet washed. But Simon Peter objects because slaves and servants wash the feet of the dinner guests, not teachers, definitely not lords. Stripping off his clothes and wrapping himself in a towel and kneeling on the floor to wash the dirty feet of the disciples was an act which put Christ in the same position and work as the lowliest servants and house slaves. But to Simon's objection, Christ says, unless you let me perform this service for you, you have no share with me. So Simon Peter responds then that his whole body should be washed. If his master was to wash him, he wants his whole body to be washed, his feet, his head, his hands, everything. And to which, again, Christ says, no. Your feet will do. The rest of your body is washed already. Let me give you this service that you need. Christ's reasoning can be read in a number of ways. The Gospel of John was likely written during a period in which there was starting to become a divide between the Jews, and in the synagogue there was an internal division between the Gospel author, who very likely was kicked out of the temple, and the Jewish community. And thus it's very easy to read in this passage terms of insiders and outsiders, those who are washed, or you could say baptized if you wanted to read it that way, and those who are not. But there's another way to read this text, and it's to read it as a text about right relationships. Christ's humbling act, it flattens the hierarchy between student and teacher, between Lord and servants, between friends. Christ's declaration of, unless I wash you, you can have no share with me, is setting the tone for a reciprocal kind of relationship. Unless I can serve you as you serve me, then we cannot be in a relationship, not truly together. The work of the teacher, the master, our Lord, is not just to be obeyed, but it is to serve and to give us what we need as well. George told me that when he joined the church, he promised to give what he needs and to take what he needs. Give what you need, take what you need. And maybe right relationship is a little more like that. When Simon Peter insists his whole body to be washed, he's essentially using the same kind of logic as when he protested to Christ washing his feet at all. The line of thinking is, Christ is too good, too high up. He is my Lord, my master, to be washing my feet like a slave or a servant. But if he insists on washing my feet, I'll show my humility and my respect for him by having him wash more of my body, to serve me more than he has requested. Truly, I should be washed fully by him. But Christ refuses, and he insists on washing Simon Peter's feet, and only his feet as he has every other disciple's feet. He insists on washing Simon Peter's feet because that is customarily what would have happened in this situation. To wash the dirty, tired feet of the dinner guests. Christ serves as needed, but does not make a spectacle out of the act of service. This is what it means to be in relationship. To serve and to be served. To love one another as Christ loves us. To love one another until the very end. To serve one another, to wash each other's feet, to both serve and to be served. This is what it means to be relationship with Christ and to be in relationship with one another. The foot washing makes me think of how much emphasis we are putting on washing our hands. It seems I wash my hands about 1,000 times a day, and I am constantly putting lotion on my cracked and dried knuckles. Reminds me of how we're being asked to be extra cautious, to not go out unless we need to sanitize, to wear masks, to totally change our lives to stop the spread of the virus. Now, we may not be washing each other's feet after we come into each other's homes, after a long day of walking and working to share a meal together, but we are being asked to serve and to be served in a different way at this time. We are being asked to have the humility to change and adapt to the circumstances out of a love for one another that will see this through till the very end. We are being asked to acknowledge that each one of us depends on each other. That at this time we cannot do it alone. We have to serve and to be served in order to get through this. I pray during this time, we not only serve, but we allow ourselves to be served. I pray that we do all the recommended steps of stopping the spread of the virus, but we open ourselves to being served, to receiving groceries and necessities, accepting generosity and kindness, and understanding that the distance is for our benefit as well as our neighbors. The name Maundy Thursday comes from the commandment Christ gives the disciples. Mandatum in Latin, which is the base for the English word mandate, is just that, a commandment. On Maundy Thursday, we remember the Last Supper, but we also remember Christ's words, I give you a new commandment, that you love one another. Just as I have loved you, you also should love one another. By this, everyone will know that you are my disciples, if you have love for one another. Let us receive the love of Christ, showing our acceptance and love for one another, living into the commandment of loving one another, making our faith known by our love, by serving and being served. If you have communion elements, or bread, coffee, bagels, juice, milk, goldfish, whatever's available, you can maybe pause now and gather it, and I ask that you grab them and join me in the commemoration of the Lord's Supper, the Last Supper of this commandment of Maundy Thursday. On the night that he was being betrayed, Jesus gathered for a meal with his disciples, and at the meal, he took a loaf of bread and gave thanks and broke it and said, "This is my body, broken for you." And in a like manner, he took the cup and said, "This is the blood of the new covenant, poured out for many." Every time we eat this bread and drink from this cup, we proclaim the Lord's death and resurrection until he comes again, and we proclaim this new commandment, that we shall love one another just as Christ has loved us, and the world will know that we follow Christ through our love. Please pray with me. Let us be served at this communion meal. Let us enter into right relationship with you, God, and with one another. Let us serve the world and love one another until the very end. Let us model ourselves in the ways that Christ modeled service to us and the washing of feet. Lord, may this meal act as lotion for the dry and cracked parts of our hearts. Bless this bread and cup that they may show that we have a share with Jesus. May this bread and cup and the constant and abiding presence of Christ empower us to let the world know we are Christians by our love. Amen.